Hello and welcome back to the Keep Right On podcast. I'm Alex Dickin, and just this week it's me and Brian Dick, and we are going to be talking about a lot of things. But firstly, Brian, how are you?
Yeah, fine, thank you. Just come down from Cloud9 from Monday night, but I'm all well, and I'm scaling my next peak of excitement with a little bit of a plug or an advertisement you've got for us in a couple of seconds.
Yeah, so we're going to start really by speaking about the big game this weekend in League One, Rotherham against Real Birmingham. And then we are going to be talking about our favourite ever Blues player, which is part of a giveaway we are doing. Brian, shall I talk about it now, or should we wait 10, 15 minutes and then talk about it?
So, yeah, let's just tell everybody it's a Christophe Dugarry related giveaway. So if you keep listening, you'll find out how to win a little bit of special memorabilia.
Yes, and then we are also this week celebrating Keep Right On podcast's 1 year anniversary. So we're going to be talking a little bit about that, talking about a few of the interviews we've had, and also what we're hoping to see Birmingham City achieve by the second anniversary of this podcast. Brian, it has been a long time with this podcast, hasn't it? Really, it's felt like a long time because a lot of last season was not very pleasurable. But yeah, more on that later.
It was miserable, wasn't it? And you know, it's taken us a year to get to the point where we actually have to bribe people to carry on listening. So yeah, I think we've had a good run.
Yeah, we have. Starting with the Rotherham game this weekend, I actually found it quite interesting that it was well over a week in advance, maybe 2 weeks, 10 days, 2 weeks, that Steve Evans decided to start talking about the Birmingham City fixture. He started a press conference, I think, pre-Burton Albion last weekend by saying, this is our preparation for our game against the Real Madrid of League One. And then at the end of the interview, called Birmingham City Real Birmingham. I suppose, is it a nice thing? What can we read into that? It's obviously mind games. What can we read into it, Brian?
Everyone's getting their apologies or their excuses in first, aren't they? Maybe even, as you say, as early as 2 weeks. Listen, Blues are blowing people out of the water, aren't they? And we saw on Monday, I think probably for the first time, the real consequence or potential, or the sort of the time bomb that Blues are potentially going to be this season. But yeah, absolutely. Steve Evans is, it comes to the fact that he's one of the most voluble or outspoken managers in the game anyway. He's obviously got a very high-profile sideline presence. I remember him coming to St Andrews and celebrating in front of their fans. Just a relatively straightforward league match win. So yeah, he is a larger-than-life character, we'll call it. But it's in everybody's mind, isn't it? It is still a big talking point. Blues have got an embarrassment of riches, and we've spoken about it ad nauseum on here. Look at the options in midfield. You've got a Scotland international up front, as you said the other night, can only get 20 minutes in a League One fixture off the bench. It is a talking point, and other managers have noticed it, and they have to manage their fans' expectations a little bit when Blues come to town.
Yeah, Steve Evans has always been pretty good at diversion tactics, hasn't he? I remember last season when he's in his first game as Rotherham manager again. His return was against Blues, wasn't it? And he came out in that sombrero, which obviously was a bit of a famous thing from his first time around as Rotherham manager. So yeah, probably, we're going to speak to Chris Davis at the press conference on Thursday afternoon, and he's probably not going to kind of bite or pay any kind of attention to it because he's very focused on his own kind of thing, and that's probably the way he has to be. But yeah, there's a few statistics that I want to go into, Brian. We're expecting a real kind of contrast of styles, aren't we here? So Blues are the possession-based force in League One, 68.2% average possession. Rotherham, pretty middle of the road or a little bit lower, 46.5% average possession. So a team that doesn't necessarily have to have the ball. They have won a League One high 35.8 aerial balls per game. And they are fourth in terms of long balls per game, 80 per game they average. Whereas Blues, 582 short passes per game puts them comfortably, by the way, the best team in terms of ball retention on the floor. Is it that simple, Brian? Are we expecting Route 1 Rotherham against free-flowing Birmingham City?
To an extent, yeah. I mean, obviously, that there will be more nuanced than that. I think Rotherham will look at Blues' set-piece goal they conceded against Wrexham. They'll probably look at Wrexham's first 10, 15 minutes when they, to be fair, they did actually cause Blues a few issues, didn't they? Wrexham are very good at getting crosses into the box, and I think you've got some numbers that show just how effective Rotherham are at getting balls into the box as well. So, yeah, I don't think it'll be massively different from the Wrexham game, albeit the other major variable is, Rotherham are at home. Is there more onus on them to take the initiative, or is it just a case of whatever you do, don't get beat? I would say I expected Rotherham to have more points on the board than they have now. One or two of their performances, I think, have gone unrewarded, but they are subpar from where I expected them to be. And just as a little aside, I go back to a little bit of anxiety on social media, sort of in June and early July time, when Rotherham was signing up all the good free agents, and certain elements of Blues Twitter started getting a little bit edgy when they signed Johnson, Clark, Harris. And now we are Lyndon Dykes and Jay Stansfield are 2 signings on, aren't we? So, it's going to be a difficult game. Yes, absolutely, it is going to be a difficult game. For having said all that,
I don't think in early June or mid-June, whenever that was, I don't think many of us or any of us realised kind of the scale of the transfer budget that Blues would have. Maybe Blues didn't quite even expect to spend that much themselves, but 20 to 25 million, whatever, spent in one window is unheard of for a League One club. Going back to that statistic you mentioned about the crosses, Rotherham are averaging 31 crosses per game, so that's the most of any team in League One by some distance. And obviously, integral to that is Malik Wilkes, a winger on loan from Sheffield Wednesday, did okay in the Championship last year. So he's one to watch. And Rotherham have obviously, you've already mentioned Johnson, Clark, Harris. They've got, I think, Jordan Hugel as well still. So they've got kind of a bit of aerial power in the box for those crosses when they do come in. So a big thing for me, and one worry I have, Brian, going into this game, is the absence of Christian Bielik. Obviously Bielik and Clara have struck up a really good understanding at the back for Blues. And Blues aren't a massive team. They're bigger this year. They've got obviously Bielik, Clara, and Willem Williamson. So, but aside from that, they haven't got much, have they? They are quite a diminutive side still. Whether he brings someone like Dykes in for this game just to give Blues that little bit of extra aerial presence at set pieces, that's an interesting one to ponder. But is Ben Davies going to have the same level of dominance in the box as Bielik? I'm not so sure about that.
Well, I'm just looking at Ben Davies while you were talking there. I don't think he's as tall as Bielik. He's, according to his Wikipedia page, which means it was definitely right. He's 6'1", 1.85 meters in new money. I think Bielik is a little bit taller than that, isn't he? Isn't he 6'3"?
Yeah, 6'3",
yeah. And I've spoken about it in previous podcasts where teams have sort of targeted the Bielik and Cochrane. Excuse me, I just battered the. They have targeted the Bielik and Cochrane side, the sort of left side of Blues defence. So yeah, I would think Ben Davies is going to have plenty of headers to win. And do you know what? That might play into his strengths. Potentially, it does. I think when we saw him against Walsall, the bigger issue was the use of the ball and playing out, wasn't it? Rather than, anything defensively. So, yeah, he's going to be thrown into it and it'll be physical and he'll have headers to win. And that's probably a good starting point. We'll then see, once the initial wave has been repelled, we'll then see how good Blues are with the ball. But it feels like the combinations are settling down a little bit, didn't it? Against Wrexham, you saw the Iwata and Peck sort of axis in midfield. So maybe things are starting to groove a little bit in terms of attacking once they have got the ball.
What are we thinking in terms of team selection? Obviously, we know that the likelihood is Ben Davies will come in for Bielik at the back.
So what are the other options? Is there another option?
I don't think there is. I mean, I am speaking pre-press conference, but I'm based on what Chris Davis told me last week. I'm not expecting Deontay Anderson to be fit for this one. So the two available centre backs are Clara and Davies. So you presume that Davies plays. However, we presumed Alfon Samsted would play it right against Wrexham, and Davies went for Taylor Gardner-Hickman, and that worked very well. Yeah. That's obviously another debate whether Gardner-Hickman keeps place, which I presume he probably will for that extra physicality that he's got over Samsted, especially as Blues have lost Bielik. You would presume Davis comes in. We've had the debate about the goalkeeper a million times, so it's probably one to leave to Chris Davis and just wait and see what happens against Rotherham. Midfield, you can't really change it, can you, Brian?
I don't think so, unless they've got some data which says that they ran so much, they covered so much ground that maybe they might be slightly fatigued. If Blues beat Wrexham at home and then go away to Rotherham, who were pre-season one of the challengers, and they beat them in the same week, we're talking a double marker, really, aren't we? And things really being up and running. I mean, it's not long since we sat on here and hailed Mark Leonard the second coming of Barry Ferguson, is it? It's keep saying it. The options are ridiculous, but no, I'd be loath to sort of pick that partnership apart. I think Peck and Iwata really looked high-end championship, didn't they, on Monday?
Yeah. So the debate really comes in the front four, doesn't it? Again, so
yeah.
On the right, I don't really think anyone was playing on the right of it against Wrexham. I think Williamson probably was, with May just off Stansfield as a striker, and obviously Emil Hansen providing the width on the left. Who's at risk there, Brian? I mentioned Dykes earlier being an option just because of his extra physicality in the absence of Bielik. That is one that actually wouldn't surprise me. But then again, where do you put Stansfield? Does Stansfield then have to drop and players where May is playing? That would probably mean you have to leave May out the starting 11, which seems harsh on a player who scored 4 league goals in 5 matches. Hansen, I feel like, even though he hasn't set the world alight for either of us, I feel like he probably is going to get the nod on that left wing because of how important that position is in terms of the balance of the system. And I think he does play it quite well. And I don't see him taking Williamson out of the starting 11. I think May's probably the only one at risk of that front four.
With Keshi Anderson in maybe, or Dykes?
Yeah, I'd say Dykes probably the one that I'm looking at.
For the height and the aerial prowess purposes, yeah. If you're asking me to predict, I'd be really surprised if he took Alfie May out. I do have to be honest. I'd be surprised if he took Stansfield out. Williamson maybe. If we're looking at the 4 of Hansen, Williamson, May and Stansfield, I wonder if Williamson is the one that might get spelled, rather than dropped, just sort of, taken out and rotated. And then who do you bring in? You probably do bring Dykes in as the target man and Stansfield to play just behind him, with May and Hansen also in that, what you'd think would be a pretty fluid attacking 3. I think I'd go that way. You've taught me into a Dykes start.
Okay, I'm surprised you've taken Williamson out there because I was trying to get some height in the team, to be honest, with Dykes. But yeah, you've gone like for like there. 1 6'3" player out, 1 in.
Yeah, okay. Maybe it's just as well I'm not picking the team. Listen, I've said it. It's probably wrong. I'm sure it will be wrong. But yeah, I just can't see drop. I think dropping Alfie May just seems like an absolute a line you don't cross at the moment. I think.
Yeah,
the poor lad knows it must be reasonably out of joint already. In terms of the loss of the striker role. You have absolutely highlighted an inconsistency in my argument, and I thank you for that. Particularly, me being the president of the Thor fan club. But actually, I'm just going to completely backtrack. No, Lyndon Dykes isn't starting, and it's the same attacking 4. There you go.
Fantastic. Well, to be fair, Chris Davies can't make as controversial a team selection as Blues made, as well as Gary Rowett made when he was Blues manager on the last Rotherham in April. I think I don't really need to remind people of what happened, but obviously, Blues had just beaten Coventry City the week before, 3-0, best performance of the season. And Rowett took out one of the chief instigators of that team in Koji Miyoshi and played Oliver Burke on the strength of probably a week's training and his knowledge of him at Millwall, because Burke, had been injured for a while, hadn't made a league start since, I think, January 1st. And it didn't get to plan, did it? I mean, it was a bit of a disaster. Burke was quite poor, very poor, in fact. And by the end of the first half at the New York Stadium, he was being booed by his own supporters with his, every touch. I actually remember one instance where he got towards the box into a dangerous position, and Blues fans quite clearly wanted to let Rowett know that they didn't want him on the field, but realised that he was actually in a good position and maybe something could happen. So they were quite, do we boom, do we not boom? But yeah, so that was the end of Oliver Burke's Blues career, and probably actually the end of kind of Rowett's audition, I think, in terms of his chances of getting the job full time after that. I think that kind of worked against him, to be honest, that selection, in the eyes of Knighthead. So, I mean, that was my, memorable trip to the New York Stadium. Brian, talk me through a couple of yours, because you saw something quite extraordinary, I think, in the Zola era.
Yeah, I've had a couple of unpleasant afternoons up there. Went up there with John Eustace, and he put out a really young side, a really young midfield, and they lost 2-0. A couple of goals from Richard Wood, big sort of veteran centre back, and that was at the start of the Eustace era, and it really, it just looked like, oh my God, Blues have not got the horses for this competition, sort of thing. They look totally overpowered. But obviously the one you're referring to, yeah, and I think I've spoken about it before, is the 1-0. No, sorry, it was a 1-1 draw towards turned out to be Zola's penultimate game, his last away game. Blues went 1-0 up with a Kerim Fry goal, and then conceded a late equaliser, and the relegation bells really were jangling, and then the players came out for their warm down at the end of the game, or after the game, and then they ended up having a confrontation on the pitch. So yeah, there always seems to be something eventful happening whenever Blues go to Rotherham, and it's not all bad. I remember Blues 3 centre backs, Pedersen, Harley Dean, and Mark Roberts combining for a set piece goal to give Lee Bowyer's team a 1-0 win. So they do have some success up there. But yeah, it always seems to be quite a fighty encounter.
Yeah. Like you said earlier, Brian, Rotherham's results haven't been great, have they, so far this season? 17th in League One, 1 win, 3 draws, 2 defeats. Lost to Exeter on the opening day, 0-0 with Bristol Rovers. Lost away to Wickham. Managed to beat Huddersfield at home 2-1. Drew away at Charlton, and drew last weekend against Burton Albion at home 2-2. They've not lived up to it, have they? We kind of expected them to be, alongside Huddersfield, probably Charlton as well, Wrexham, maybe Stockport, because they look strong after coming up, to be among the early pace setters, but they haven't lived up to it, and they're actually struggling to kind of get results, even against sides that like Burton Albion, who we probably expect to be, competing to stay in the league at the other end.
Yeah, they have struggled. I know they felt very shortchanged from their opening day trip to, was it Exeter? I think they did more than enough to take something from that game. I think they've been very close, but not quite there a couple of occasions. I think the points they've got on the board is actually probably, if there was an XG for points, I would say they'd be under it in terms of performances put into points won. And you know what? I'm going to fall into the terrible cliche trap here. It is going to be a cup final for them, isn't it? And Steve Evans is going to absolutely wind his team up, and the New York Stadium crowd will be wound up, particularly in light of seeing what Blues did to Wrexham. It's a little bit of a tiger by the tail kind of fixture, this one for me. Blues will have to manage the game really, really well, and obviously, one way of doing that is to suck the life out of everybody with 70% possession and not conceding any chances. You just wonder how many risks they take at the back if Bielik's not there and Ben Davies is in there, that might be the one change potentially. And then if you are coming back to your point about Lyndon Dykes, if you're going to go a little bit more direct, do you then need Dykes? I'm going to talk myself back into putting Dykes back in my 11. Yeah. Lots to think about for Chris Davies, this one.
Yeah. 20 minutes on Rotherham seems enough, Brian. Do you want to do it? Do you want to talk about the giveaway, the special prize we've got?
Yeah, so okay, what we've got here is we've got as exhibited by Mr. Dickin here.
Hang on, I'm going to mess this up. It'll come upside down. Oh no, I've got the right one.
No, very good. It is a signed Christophe Dugarry poster. We've got 2 of them, which we'd like to give away to listeners. So all you need to do to be eligible to win one of these, thanks Alex, is to leave a comment on the YouTube channel just underneath this. Leave a comment. Tell us who your favourite Blues player of all time is, whether it's Dugarry or it can be anybody else. Jonathan Grounds, maybe anybody. Just tell us. Leave in the comment section your favourite Blues player of all time, and we'll randomly pick a couple and then touch base with whoever we pick to send you out those 2 posters. So does that about cover it, Alex?
Yeah, they are cracking, to be honest. There's 2 of them. Really, really good. I have had the pleasure of looking after them for the last week or 2, and I've thought about putting them on the wall in my office, but yeah, they're probably better used in a Blues fan's home or whatever. So yeah, give it a go and get yourself in with a chance of winning.
Just to say, they are signed by Le God himself. So,
yeah, not me.
yeah, indeed, yes. Which brings us,
no forgeries.
brings us on, Alex. I'm going to do my favourite Blues player of all time. You can if you want, or you can just pick your favourite player of the current Blues squad. Why don't you do that?
Yeah. So mine's quite an easy one, I think. Obviously, I've only been in the gig for about 18 months, and one player has been a constant through that time, which is Christian Bielik, or also known as the Polish Beckenbauer. Now, I think he's been probably the most consistent player I've watched in that time. I think at the end of the first season, I covered 22-23. He was quite influential in Blues getting those results and getting over the line and staying up under John Eustace. And then last season, I actually think when he was used correctly in the Championship as a holding midfield player or as a centre-back, I thought he was actually excellent in those games. I know he really struggled on Wayne Rooney's watch, but I think there are probably a lot of contributing factors to that. He was excellent under Tony Mowbray, pretty good under Gary Rowett as well. So, and he's been fantastic under Chris Davies, the captain, the fulcrum of the team, the most influential player, and probably the only undroppable player, as said in a previous podcast. So yeah, Christian Bielik, I think he's, as I've said before, I think he's got the potential in this position, not only to be top-end Championship and help Blues get into the Premier League, but also to become a Premier League player.
Truth of the matter is, Alex, is you're just praising him because you want an interview with him again because you like interviewing him. That's the truth of the matter, isn't it?
It is, yeah. He's an outstanding interviewer, the best in the squad.
Yeah, he is indeed. He's always likely to say something controversial or speak his mind. He doesn't hold back, does he? And we like that about him. Yeah, I mean, I obviously first became aware of Bielik when he came into the Blues squad under Zola, actually, and he didn't play a huge amount under Zola. He was on loan from Arsenal, but he did come off the bench to play in a 2-0 win at Wolves, which seems a lifetime ago. I think Paul Robinson had been sent off and Bielik came off the bench, and he was a 19-year-old lad, barely played any sort of men's football, and he was absolutely brilliant. And I spoke to him after the game on the sideline after that. You know, I'd been blown away by the rare sight of a win, let's be honest. But the even more rare sight of a teenager coming on and really putting in a dominant performance. And he was just absolutely, well, it's what I do, you know, absolute confidence. Kind of like Nicholas Bentner was many years ago, you know, just this sort of a little bit of charisma and just unstinting self-belief. So yeah, and when he returned, you know, I had a little bit of a running joke with people in the press box that, you know, whenever he went down, you always feared for his life because he seemed to stay down forever. Obviously, he's got this legacy of you know, these very serious knee injuries, which, touch wood, seems to be well behind him now. But whenever he went down, my first thought was, I hope he's all right. I hope this isn't a career ender, and he'd get back up and carry on playing. And ironically, well, maybe it's not ironic because that was my anxiety rather than his. He's probably responsible for the single most heroic physical performance that I've seen in a blue shirt. I can't remember who it was against, but he had his front teeth kicked out.
Rotherham.
Yeah. There we go. And he ended up finding them on the pitch, didn't he? And I thought, well, this is Christian Bielik. That's probably going to put him out for 6 or 7 weeks or something like that. And then he played about 3 days later. And that's why he wears the gum shield, and you can understand that completely. But just the sheer prospect of playing football 3 days after you'd had your teeth kicked out, big it up to Christian Bielik. That is next level bravery to me.
Yeah, he doesn't take chances with a gum shield anymore, does he? I actually remember in one of the pre-season games, I think at Walsall, he simultaneously chested the ball down and caught his gum shield when it came out of his mouth, which I genuinely was my highlight of that game. It was fantastic. But yeah, Christian Bielik's a top player.
Yeah, indeed, and a good choice as captain. So you've left me with the rest of history, haven't you? Which is quite a large field. Obviously, we all enjoyed Dugarry's magic. Seeing Jude come through was, you felt a little bit like an early convert trying to tell the rest of the world, honestly, this boy is going to be something special. And there were times when Derby fans would compare him unfavourably to Louis Sibley. And you were just trying to convert people a little bit when Jude came through. But I've gone for Mikael Forsell as my favourite. Sorry?
Shock.
Yeah.
Yeah, the man you talk about all the time.
I do. And how do I explain it? I thought he was fantastic as a player when he first came over to Blues on loan from Chelsea. Blues had I think they were in their second season in the Premier League. And the big issue from the first season had been, well, where are the goals going to come from? And this lad who had a bit of a checkered injury past came in, and he scored 17 Premier League goals in his first season. Blues finished 10th. He combined really well with David Dunn, not as often as we'd liked for injury reasons, but he was a next level finisher. You go back to the days of Hatton and Latchford almost for the times when Blues had that good a striker in their team. And then he returned a couple of years later, and he'd had some injury miles or scar tissue on the clock by then. But I remember in March 2008, he scored what's called a perfect hat trick. So one with his head, one with his right foot, one with his left foot in a 4-1 victory over Spurs. And for all his first season was probably the reason why, I kind of sort of fell in love with him a little bit. That was the highlight, albeit he was maybe slightly diminished by then. But just certainly the brilliance or the clinical finish for his third goal against Spurs, a touch with his left foot, and then just complete composure. It was like time went slow for him to finish the third. And then he followed that up with, maybe about 10 years later, I spoke to him in an interview, which we ran in 3 parts, and I was just amazed that he'd agreed to do the interview, and he was brilliant. And then whenever you plan for an interview, you go in with the line you really want, and the line I really wanted was Mikael Forsell, who just sort of doing his coaching badge would one day love to come back to Birmingham City as manager. And oh my God, he ate it up, and it just sort of, for me, it cemented his place in my esteem as, my favourite ever Blues player. As I said, I'll stop rambling now. Be interesting to hear your guys' favourite Blues player, so leave them in the comments. You don't have to leave an explanation if you don't want to, but it'd be interesting if you did. And as we said, Alex and I will pick out a couple, and we'll do our best to get those signed Christophe Dugarry posters to you. Is that it, Alex? No, we get them.
I was going to say pick out the winner, and we'll announce them on the next podcast. I think that's probably right in this thing, isn't it? Yeah. We'll
figure out the practicalities of it at this end.
Yeah.
But rest assured, we'll leave no stone unturned.
Yes. Moving on to the last part of this podcast, we are celebrating a year of the podcast, I think, this week, aren't we, Brian? You reminded me of this earlier. I'd completely lost track. I knew it was around now. It's been a long year. A lot of it wasn't great. First half of it, it's got better in the last 6 months. I say last 6 months, last 3-4 months. Despite relegation, Brian, we've had a lot of interviews. We do try and do an interview like once a month, or over the summer it was a little bit more frequent because obviously there weren't games and things. You've done a good chunk. You've done a good number of interviews in that time. I wanted to ask you your favourite. I've got a couple in my mind, but go ahead with yours.
I suppose in terms of being pleasantly surprised, the Robin Shroot one that we just done very recently was good fun. I know he was time constrained, but he was a really engaging talker and spoke very fondly about Blues. So that one. But I also go back to just how we kind of fell on our feet very early on, 6 or 7 weeks into it, and it was the Gary Rowett one. Gary was out of a job at that time, and he came on and gave us a really interesting analysis of Blues at that point. It was Rooney's Blues at that point, just become Rooney's Blues. And he spoke about a couple of players, and it just gave us a real insight. And little did any of us know that 3 or 4 months later he'd be back managing those players. But I always enjoy speaking to Gary Rowett. That was one of the other interviews, and I bet I've stolen your two, haven't I?
Well, I love the Robin Shroot one. I said to you at the time after watching the first minute that I loved it, just by kind of demeanour and the way he was. I really like the Gary Rowett one, obviously, because of the insight. It was fantastic. And like you say, we did land on our feet. And I think that is our most watched, definitely on YouTube, our most watched podcast. But I think a lot of those streams came after Gary Rowett was appointed interim manager, because people obviously had this kind of ready-made insight and kind of could get an insight as to what he actually thought about the Blues team and what he thought had gone wrong in the season. So that was really good. I've enjoyed a few. I enjoyed Jordan Graham, to be honest, because it was slightly different. I enjoy the ones with the young lads, Odin Bailey that you did, and also Tate Campbell, because he had a very interesting story to tell, a little bit different. Hopefully we can get more in the next year. I mean, I'd love it if we could get Mikel Fultel for you, to be honest. I think that would be great.
Oh dear, imagine how starstruck I'd be. You'd have to ask the questions, and I'd just sit there looking like the emoji with the love hearts in the eyes.
I think the podcast, the StreamYard, YouTube could make that happen. That would top it off. Brian, one thing you said, you wanted to have a hope for our second year anniversary. I think mine's pretty simple and basic. I think I want Blues to obviously be in the Championship, hopefully having won League One, because I think that's the best way to get out of this league. Although the playoffs, everyone talks about the playoffs, I do want Blues to win the league. And I mean, if Blues do win the league and are challenging in the Championship this time next year, which will be 5 or 6 games in, then Chris Davis will still be in a job, won't he? And we'll have had a manager, or I'll have had a manager in my tenure as Blues reporter for longer than 3 months. So that would be excellent.
You've stolen my answer. Actually, I was going to say for Chris Davis still to be in charge, because of what that will mean. Exactly that. And I think just an extension to that as well, it would be if this style of play is totally ingrained. The possession game is second nature. The fans are all used to what they're going to see and what's coming, and being patient, which it's been very, very good so far from that point of view. But if Blues in 12 months' time have a reputation as this they'll pass you to death possession-based football team, that would be a year very, very well spent, and you'd be having some really enjoyable times, I think, during the next 12 months, if that is the case. Yeah,
excellent, brilliant. I think that's it, Brian, isn't it? Anything else to add?
No, I think that is pretty much it. Just all that remains really is to thank you for your time, to remind people to leave a comment in the bottom, just to let us know their favourite all-time Birmingham City player. Thank everyone else for listening, and thanks as ever for your interest. And it's a keep right on from both of us.